Okay, so once again, good afternoon, good day, no, good afternoon. This time our topic is research hypothesis. No? So a research hypothesis is a specific, clear, and testable propositions or predictive statement about the possible outcome of a scientific research study based on a particular property or population, such as presumed differences between groups on a particular variable or relationship between variables. So specifying the research hypothesis is one of the most important steps in planning a scientific quantitative research study. So a quantitative research usually state an a priori expectation about the result of the study in one or more research hypotheses before conducting the study, because the design of the research study in the planned research design often is determined by the stated hypothesis. Thus, one of the advantages of stating research hypothesis is that it requires the researchers to fully think. Okay, to give us more details about the topic, let us all welcome our presenter. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you po, Doc. Ayan, guys, gumagalaw po ba yung slides sa inyo? Gumagalaw na po.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Ayan, so, good morning po, Doc. Good morning, classmates.
Pwede mong F5.
Wait, sir. Ayan, okay na po. Gumagalaw, sir.
F5, F5 mo. Punta ka ng slideshow. Then tapos, from the beginning. Nakita mo yung slideshow sa taas, yung sa may ano mo. Okay, go ahead, sir.
Thank you po, Doc. So good morning po, Doc. Good morning, classmates. So for today, my topic will be all about or is about hypothesis. Okay, so yun nga po, yung hypothesis. Part po ito ng research paper natin. So yun nga po. Makinig po tayo mabuti. Okay, short na lang naman po ito. Short presentation lang naman po ito. Okay. Yan, so let's start. Okay, so for today, ang sako po ng i-report ko for today is what is a hypothesis? Characteristics po niya. We also have yung sources and yung types niya. And I have 6 steps to formulate a strong hypothesis na nakita ko po on YouTube na makakatulong din po sa atin. Okay? And so let's start. So first of all, what is a hypothesis? So a hypothesis is a tentative statement saying what you expect to find in your research. Okay? It is also a assumption that is made on the basis of some evidence. So yun nga po, yung hypothesis nga po, ito po yung pinipredict natin na outcome sa research paper natin. Kung ano yung resulta na gusto nating malaman or makita nga po. Okay? So we have the characteristics. So characteristics of hypothesis. You don't need to you don't need to take down notes. I-send ko naman po ito dun sa natin sa classroom. Di ko lang po na-upload agad. Sorry. So i-upload ko na lang po siya sa classroom or sa group chat po natin. So characteristics of hypothesis, we have it should be clear and precise to consider to be reliable, of course. It should be stating the relationship between the variables if the hypothesis is a relational hypothesis. It must be specific and should have a scope or should have scope for conducting more tests. And it must be very simple, and it should be understood that the simplicity of the hypothesis isn't related to its significance. Next, we have the sources of hypothesis. Sources meaning kung saan natin pwede siyang ma-obtain sa research natin. The semblance between the phenomenon, observations from past studies, present-day experiences, and from the competitors. We also have scientific theories. And lastly, we have general patterns that influence the thinking process of people. Okay. So next, we have the 6 types of hypothesis. Okay. First of all, simple hypothesis. It shows a relationship between one dependent variable and a single independent variable. For example, if we eat more vegetables, we will lose weight faster. So in this example, Eating more vegetables is the independent variable, while losing weight is the dependent variable. Next, we have complex hypothesis. It shows the relationship between two or more dependent variables and two or more independent variables. Okay. So, example, eating more vegetables and fruits leads to weight loss. Weight loss, glowing skin reduces the risk of many diseases such as heart diseases, high blood pressure, and some form of cancers. Okay. So directional and non-directional. So in directional hypothesis, it shows how a researcher is intellectual and committed to a particular outcome, while the non-directional hypothesis, is used when there is no theory involved. It is a statement that a relationship exists between two variables without predicting the exact nature or direction of the relationship. So for example, in directional hypothesis, children aged 4 years old eating proper food over a 5-year period are having higher IQ levels than children not having a proper meal. Okay? And for non-directional hypothesis example, boys and girls are different in terms of helpfulness. Okay? So sa non-directional, hindi nga po concise kung ano yung tinutukoy na outcome. Sinabi lang po dyan na in terms of helpfulness, magkaiba nga po yung babae sa lalaki. Okay? Next. By the way, nadidinig po ba ako? Loud and clear po. Sorry, I forgot to ask.
Yes, sir.
Thank you po. Null hypothesis. It provides the statement which is contrary to the hypothesis. It is a negative statement and there is no relationship between independent and dependent variables. The symbol is denoted by HO. So dito rin sa picture na nakuha ko, may description din siya. Okay, so as you can see, ayan po. The example is, cats show no preference for food based on shape. So syempre, ang kakainin pa rin nila, kesyo anong shape man yan, and as long as magustuhan nila, kakainin nila yun. And second, plant growth is not affected by light color. So kung ano mang kulay nung ilaw na ginagamit para magpatubo or magpalaki ng halaman ng indoor plant, for example, ay hindi daw nakaka-apekto sa paglaki nito. Depende pa rin po yan sa kung paano natin aalagaan yung halaman na indoor plant natin. Okay, next. Age has no effect on musical ability. Okay, so this one is correct. Okay. And so of course, if you have a interest in music or yun nga po, yung musical abilities nyo, gusto nyo ma-discover at a younger age, you may. Pwede naman po. Okay? Again, age has no effect on musical ability. Kesyo anong edad ka man po, kesyo bata ka pa or teenager or nasa mid-20s, 30s or what, hindi po nakaka-apekto yan kung gusto nyo mag-pursue ng music interest ninyo. Okay? Next. Associative and causal hypothesis. So, associative states that there is a relationship between two variables, while causal states that any difference in the type or amount of one particular variable is going to directly affect the difference in the type or amount of the next variable in the equation. Next. So lastly, we have the 6 steps to formulate a strong hypothesis. Okay, so this may help us in the near future kapag gagawa na po tayo ng ating or kapag tatapusin natin yung research paper natin. So you may makakatulong sa atin to. Okay, 6 steps to formulate a strong hypothesis. Step 1, of course, is ask a question. Writing a hypothesis begins with a research question that you want to answer. And the question should be focused, specific, and researchable. For example, what are the health benefits of eating an apple a day? So as you all know, you've heard the phrase of an apple a day keeps the doctor away. So if yun yung pagtutuunan natin ng pansin sa thesis natin, for example, ayan, yung isang question na tatakbo sa utak natin about that phrase is, ano nga po ba yung mga health benefits ng pagkain ng mansanas kada araw? Okay, next. Step number 2. Do some preliminary research. Your initial answer to the question should be based on what is already known about the topic. Look for theories and previous studies to help you form an educated assumption. For example, we found out that apples are nutritious. They are high in vitamin C that can boost your immune system. These are the health benefits that might contribute to fewer doctor's visits. Okay, step number 3. Formulate your hypothesis. After you've done your research, write down your initial answer to the question in a clear and concise sentence. For example, daily apple consumption leads to fewer doctor's visits. Step number 4, refine your hypothesis. So you have to make sure the hypothesis is specific and testable. It should contain the relevant variables, the predicted outcome of the experiment or analysis, and the specific group being studied. So for example, daily apple consumption leads to fewer doctor's visits, whereas the predicted outcome is the fewer, yeah, highlighted by the highlighted color pink. And for the relevant variables, which is the apple consumption and the doctor's visits, are the relevant variables. Okay, sorry, ulit. Step number 5, trace your hypothesis in 3 ways. So the first form is the if and then form. For example, if people over 60 years old consume an apple daily, then they will visit the doctor. Okay, so medyo naulit. Sorry po. Sa typo. Ayusin ko na lang po. They will visit the doctor less frequently, whereas the dependent variable is they will visit the doctor less frequently, and the independent variable or the cause is the consume an apple daily. And the pink one or the dependent variable is the effect. Okay, so the next form we have is the correlation or the effect. Trace the hypothesis in terms of a correlation or effect. So daily apple consumption by people over 60 years old will result in a decreased frequency of doctor's visits. And the last form is the comparison where we are comparing two groups. So for example, people over 60 who consume an apple daily visit the doctor less frequently than those who don't. So last but not the least, or step number 6, write a null hypothesis. So if your research involves a statistical hypothesis testing, you also need to write a null hypothesis. So null hypothesis is it has no effect between the variables. So for example, daily apple consumption in over 60 years old will have no effects on the frequency of doctor's visits. Okay, so that's all. Doc and classmates, thank you po. So I hope you've learned something about today. Thank you so much po.
Okay, so thank you very much. Okay, again, a hypothesis is a statement that can be tested by scientific research. So if you want to test a relationship between 2 or more things, you need to write hypothesis before you start your experiment or data collection. So a hypothesis state your predictions about your research will find. It is tentative answer to your research question that has not yet been tested. So for some research projects, you might have to write several hypotheses that address different aspects of your research question. So a hypothesis is not just a guess. It should be based on existing theories and knowledge. It is also has to be testable, which means you can support or refute it through scientific research methods such as experiment, observation, and statistical of data. So hypothesis propose a relationship between 2 or more variables. No, an independent variables is something that research changes or controls, and the dependent variable is something the researcher observe and measure. So in developing a hypothesis, no, our presenter give us some steps on how we'll be able to deliver. Yes, that's correct. Another way on how we'll be able to in developing a hypothesis, number 1, ask a question. No, writing a hypothesis begins with a research question that you want to answer. So the question should focus specific and researchable within the constraint of your project. Do students who attend more lectures get better exam results, as I mentioned earlier? Now, number 2, do some preliminary research. Now, your initial answer to the question should be based on what is already known about the topic. Look for theories and previous studies to help you form educated assumptions about what your research will find. At this stage, you might construct a conceptual framework to identify which variables you will study and what you think the relationship are between them. So mas madaling mag-create ng hypothesis. Siyempre, dapat meron na tayong conceptual framework, no? Number 3, formulate your hypothesis. Now you should have some idea of what you expect to find. Write your initial answers to the questions in a clear, concise sentence. So, like, attending more lecture leads to better exam results. Pwedeng ganon, no? Then after that, refine your hypothesis. So you need to make sure your hypothesis is specific and testable. There are various ways of phrasing a hypothesis, but all the terms you use should have clear definitions, and the hypothesis should contain the relevant variables, the specific group being studied, and the predicted outcome of the experiments or analysis. Number 5, phrase your hypothesis in 3 ways. To identify the variables, you can write a simple prediction in if, then form. The first part of the sentence states the independent variable, and the second part states the dependent variable. So let's say it is if a first-year student start attending more lectures, then their exam scores will improve. In academic research, hypotheses are more commonly phrased in terms of correlation or effects, where you directly state the predicted relationship between variables. Let's say the number of lectures attended by first-year students has a positive effect on their exam scores. So, ano relationship doon? Positive effect. Okay? So, if you are comparing 2 groups, the hypothesis can state what difference you expect to find between them. Let's say, for example, first-year student who attended most lectures will have better exam score than those who attended few lectures. Ano yung difference? Better exam scores than those who attended few lectures. No? So number 6, write a null hypothesis. No? If your research involved statistical hypothesis testing, you will also have to write a null hypothesis. No? So the null hypothesis is the default position that there is no association between the variables. And the null hypothesis written as H sub O, while the alternative hypothesis is write as H sub 1 or kaya naman H sub A. No, yung isa kasi pwedeng H sub O or H sub 0. Yung pag yun ang hypothesis, null hypothesis, H sub O or H sub 0. While the alternative hypothesis is written as H sub 1, yung iba naman ginagamit H sub A. So, let's say for example, null hypothesis, H sub O colon, the number of lectures attended by first-year student has no effect on their final exam score. Okay? Ang null hypothesis, ang alternative naman, the number of lectures attended by first-year student has a positive effect on their final score or exam scores. No? So I already posted in our FB Messenger, no, some hypothesis example. Ano yung mga research question? Ano yung hypothesis? Ano yung null hypothesis? So nagbigay ako ng 5 na example. Okay? So again, a hypothesis states your prediction about your research will find. It is tentative answer to your research question that has not yet been tested. So a hypothesis is not just a guess. It should be based on existing theories and knowledge. It is also has to be testable, which means you can support or refute it through scientific research methods. Okay? So I think that's it for this topic.